Hello, my name is Gary Davidson. I'm a Jewish chaplain stationed at Osan Air Base in South Korea. I want to thank you for joining me today as together we learn about the Holocaust. I want to begin my talk about the Holocaust by discussing briefly about some of the factors that led to the Holocaust. And to start off, I want to talk about World War I, which occurred from 1914 to 1918. And what kicked off World War I is when a Bosnian Serb nationalist assassinated the heir to the Austria-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Well, basically, that's the spark that caused World War I. Austria-Hungary wanted to retaliate against the assassination. They brought in their strongest ally, Germany, whereas the Bosnian Serbs had their allies, Russia, France, England, and eventually the United States. And the two sides squared against each other. It was a horrible war that lasted from 1914 to 1918, and a total of 16 million people ended up dying as a result. It was such a horrible war that it became known as the war to end all wars. Well, the Allies, meaning the Americans, the French, the Brits, the Russians, wanted to heavily punish Germany for its major leading role in the war. And so what they did is they levied huge fines in the amount of $33 billion against Germany, limited the size of German land by 25,000 square miles. The German army was reduced to only 100,000 soldiers. It really punished Germany severely. And then in the 1920s and 30s, Germany suffered even more because of a rampant inflation and then a horrific economic depression in which their money became worthless. Millions were thrown out of work. People were desperate for food or clothing, anything, and they needed a savior. And unfortunately, that savior for the German people in the aftermath of World War I was Adolf Hitler, who himself had served as a lance corporal in the Bavarian army in World War I. Hitler was a very powerful speaker and a magnetic personality in some ways, and he was very angry about the loss of World War I, and he wanted to restore Germany to its greatness. And he also talked a lot about restoring jobs in the economy, and so this won over a lot of Germans who were so desperate for help. And he also mysteriously blamed, to some degree, blamed the Jews and communists for the woes of the Germans. No one really knows why he blamed the Jews or the communists. It's not really clear, and it's ironic that a Jewish doctor actually helped save Hitler's mother's life. But nonetheless, he had a hatred for both. And Hitler started the Nazi Party with his strong speeches and trying to bring the German people together under his leadership. And in 1923, he tried to overthrow the government. And that rebellion, known as the Beer Hall Putsch, was a failure. And Hitler was thrown in jail for 9 months for trying to overthrow the German government. But while in jail, he wrote his book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle, in which he talked about how he would restore Germany to greatness in his political and economic platforms, but he also showed a tremendous venom towards the Jews. Well, once he was released from jail, he continued his politicking, and in 1932, the Nazi Party had grown so big under Hitler that it was the largest vote-getting party, and in 1933, Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. In 1934, he became the President of Germany. There was now no stopping Hitler now that he was in charge of Germany. He was also known as the Führer, as the leader. And yes, he began trying to economically restore Germany and create jobs and make Germany great. However, he also started to target those who he felt were political opponents, unionists, and Jews as well. He began from 1933 through 1938 even, a number of 400 discriminatory laws against particularly the Jews, stripped them of German citizenship, told the German people they cannot shop in Jewish-owned stores. The Jewish school children were thrown out of German schools. Jews couldn't practice their professions. A Jew couldn't have sexual relations with another German. They couldn't marry another German. 400 discriminatory laws, and ironically, many of these same laws were applied to those of brown skin who were living in Germany at the time. In 1938, though, things changed once again with the assassination of a low-level Nazi diplomat by a 17-year-old Jewish German of Polish descent. His parents, along with 17,000 other German Jews, had been pushed out of Germany towards Poland. And the Poles refused to take in these 17,000 German Jews of Polish ancestry who were forced out of Nazi Germany. And so Herschel Grinspan, upon hearing that his parents were rotting in no man's land and essentially dying, he assassinated a Nazi diplomat in Paris. And the man's name was Ernst von Rath, which caused the Nazis to organize the biggest pogrom in world history, which is a murder spree. On the night of November 9th and then November 10th, 1938, Germans, hooligans throughout Germany and also many in Austria, rampaged through the two countries, destroying Jewish shops and also burning down Jewish synagogues where people would pray, and murdering 91 Jews. 30,000 Jews were sent to concentration camps where several hundred more died, although most were released. But now we see a change in history of actual wholesale violence against the Jews. And Germany now is truly asserting itself in violence. But but Germany once again flexed its military muscle, at least in September of 1939, when they invaded Poland. And they wanted to take, again, grow their country and restore its greatness. And so they started to conquer European country after European country after European country, while trying to build their own country as a result. And I'm looking down at a sheet. I just want to briefly read to you some of the countries that Germany had defeated. It's really unbelievable. Poland, France, Norway, Belgium, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Hungary, Holland, the Netherlands, Norway, Greece, Serbia, Belarus, Luxembourg, Slovenia, the Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, etc., etc., etc. And then once the Nazis defeated these countries, they would set up a Nazi puppet government that would carry out their wishes in those very countries. Of course, you had partisans who would fight against the occupiers, but they simply didn't have the numbers or the training or the weapons to be able to defeat the German army or those who collaborated with the Germans in the countries they conquered. Unfortunately, with Germany growing in power throughout throughout most of Europe and dominating it, it spelled disaster for the Jews who were, beginning in 1939, rounded up into ghettos throughout Europe. It's estimated there were 400 ghettos in which the Jews were forced to live in horrible conditions, little to no food, clothing, medical treatment. There was disease, there was illness, starvation. People were dying throughout the ghettos in Europe, 400 ghettos. It was a horrific life. And they couldn't get out of the ghettos because they were barbed wires and guards around the ghettos. So it was just a miserable experience being in one of the ghettos. But as if life hadn't become bad enough for the Jews, when Germany invaded Russia in 1941, they came up with yet another murderous scheme against the Jews. And that was to have mobile German army units supported by Ukrainians go into Russia along with the main army, which was trying to conquer Russia in 1941 in June. And this group of murderers, known as the Einsatzgruppen, sole job was to round up as many Jews as they could and murder them. And one of the ways they would do them is they would have these poor Jewish victims dig pits and then undress, and the Nazis or the Ukrainians, their collaborators, would shoot at almost point-blank range these Jewish men and women and children, so their bodies would fall into the pits. The worst murderous rampage took place in the Ukrainian city of Babi Yar, when you had 33,000 Jews murdered in only 2 days. It was absolutely horrific what the Einsatzgruppen did. So it's estimated between 1 and 1.5 million Jews were murdered by the Einsatzgruppen. But as if that wasn't bad enough, the next stage of the slaughter, shall we say, took place with the establishment of labor camps and concentration camps and extermination camps. And this was part of what the Germans, I would say, evilly, but in their own humor, called the solution to the Jewish question. And the idea was to take as many Jews and other opponents of theirs, and I'll read to you some of their opponents that they also targeted aside from the Jews. You had their political opponents or union organizers, communists, socialists, social democrats, gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, others accused of socially deviant behavior, as well as ethnic Poles, Serbs, people with disabilities, common criminals, intellectuals, Catholic clergy. You see the list runs a gamut of people of different religions, cultures, nationalities, skin colors. It was a horrific attack against the so-called enemies of the Nazis. And many were sent to labor camps where they got ill-fitting clothing, they had ill-fitting shoes, they had their hair shaved off, they were badly beaten by the guards. They were fenced in with barbed wire. They were put in horrible bunkers where wooden barracks where they would sleep on wooden boards and they'd all be crammed together. It was a miserable existence. Again, illness, disease, starvation was rampant. Many, many died. And the work was absolutely horrific too, lifting heavy rocks in mines, quarries, working in military factories to produce armaments for the Germans. Life was miserable in the labor camps, in the concentration camps. And many in the concentration camps chose to throw their bodies against the electrified barbed wire rather than put up with the constant harassments and beatings and whippings and 11 to 13 hour days of backbreaking work. But of course, some of the worst camps were the extermination camps, the Chelmnos and the Belzec's and the Auschwitzes. And this is in addition to the other camps, the Dachau's and the Buchenwalds, the Sobiboors. It's estimated between 1,200 to 15,000 concentration camps created just to basically kill people. You take a place like Auschwitz, where over 1 million died. The people would arrive in cattle cars. They get off and they'd be clubbed and beaten and kicked by the guards, yelled at. They'd be forced into line up where Nazi guards would either point them in one direction or to the other. If they were pointed to their right, then they got to live a little longer. They'd be worked to death. If they pointed to the left, it was almost immediate death. And 3/4 of those who went to the extermination camps died usually right away, certainly within 24 hours. They'd be forced to go into a gas chamber where the doors were locked on them and they thought they were going in for a shower, but poison gas would come out of the shower heads. It was hydrogen cyanide poison gas from the Zyklon B pellets that mixed with air and filled the chamber with deadly gas. Within 20 minutes, 700 or 800 people in one gas chamber would be dead. And then their bodies would be carted out by many times prisoners who were forced to bring them into incinerators, where the bodies would be put on metal gurneys, inserted into the incinerator where their bodies would be reduced to ashes. And you can only imagine how the smoke that filled and covered these extermination camps, this truly was hell on earth. So I think we can all be thankful that the Allies defeated the Germans in 1945. It put an end to the horrors of the Holocaust. And in the end, 11 million people were murdered. 6 million Jews, 5 million non-Jews. It was just the worst and darkest chapter in human history. So what can we take from it? Well, we don't want another Holocaust, of course, to happen, but I think on a daily basis we have to stand up against injustice and bullying and hatred and intolerance. The idea of the Holocaust is we have to do what's right. When you see something on a daily basis, if you see someone being bullied, pushed around, treated unfairly, if you see injustice out in the streets, if you see someone being hurt, we need to be able to stand up and say, no, this is not going to happen. Hear my voice, never again. And that's what the victims of the Holocaust so much wanted is, never again should any sort of injustice like this happen again. So I'm going to conclude my talk by reading to you a passage from a diarist and Jewish Holocaust victim, Anne Frank, who talks about the horrific time of the Holocaust, but also her hope for the future, as it mirrors my own. I see the world being slowly transformed into a wilderness. I hear the approaching thunder that one day will destroy us. I feel the suffering of the many. And yet, when I look up at the sky, I somehow feel that everything will change for the better. that this cruelty too shall end, and peace and tranquility will return once more. Thank you for listening to my talk about the Holocaust, and I wish you the best.